Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, debt slicers, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks. I'm Useful Idiot. Welcome. And this morning, let's go to Syria and then global as I talk about the destruction of Palmyra. And this is an ancient Roman city in Syria that was recently liberated by Syrian and Russian forces. And it's kind of anticlimactic in Western circles. They don't seem to be that concerned the fact that this site, this World Heritage Site, has been liberated. But of course, it's because Syria and Russia did it, not the U.S. So anyway, what we have in Palmyra, of course, is this phenomenon of ISIS destroying these monuments at Palmyra, and I'm glad to see that there certainly was a pretty staggering amount of destruction there. At least a lot of it is still intact, so I'm glad to see that. Because as a longtime historian and with an interest in archaeology and world architecture and literature and art, this really hits me where I live when I see the destruction of these monuments. And of course, ISIS has been known for that. They've destroyed mosques, tombs, shrines, and churches all across Iraq, in the city of Mosul, and also in Syria, and also the very, very, very ancient sites like Nimrud, Hatra, and Nineveh have all been damaged by ISIS. And fuck them all for that. Let me just add that right now. But one of the things that's interesting to me about thinking about this destruction of Palmyra is thinking of all the precedents and all the other destruction that has gone on. So it's not necessarily isolated to ISIS as far as this phenomenon is concerned. I immediately thought of the French Revolution because when I was studying art history, finding out that so much art and architecture associated with the royalty and the church during the French Revolution was destroyed on a massive scale all across France. So a great part of human legacy was lost during that political upheaval. So what we see, of course, in common is this political religious element, these zealots. And whether it's ISIS or whether it's people in the French Revolution, it's this zealotry against religion and power, and that ends up causing this, motivating this destruction. But it was kind of interesting because I was aware of some other historical destruction and kind of think about it a fair amount of the time. But looking at a lot of information on current and previous historical destruction of art and artifacts was pretty interesting and eye-opening. Some of the recent examples, of course, are also in the Middle East and in the Islamic world, and unfortunately, it includes a couple of allies. One of the more notable ones we should all recall recently was in Afghanistan, when the Taliban destroyed, in 2001, destroyed these giant 6th century Buddhas of Bamiyan, and very, very upsetting to see that. And we also have, of course, the Taliban operating in Pakistan as well, and they've destroyed most Buddhist statues and artifacts in the Swat Valley. Once again, we see this religious animosity, and it's just okay to destroy the artifacts and priceless relics of other people's religions, and it just seems so ludicrous to me that people who are religious should have the utmost respect and reverence, the same kind they expect for their own heritage. They should be having that same sort of respect for other people's heritage, particularly when it goes back often hundreds and thousands of years. So we have the Taliban in Afghanistan, we have ISIS in Syria and Iraq. We also have our allies. Bahrain has destroyed 43 Shia mosques since 2011, since the uprising there, that continues to go on, including a 400-year-old ornate mosque called the Amir Muhammad Braghi Mosque. So they don't really care about Muslim heritage so much, particularly if it's just the other Muslims and not their Muslim beliefs. Saudi Arabia, the same thing. It's indiscriminate in its destruction of historic sites, especially things related to early Islam. I understand they've destroyed hundreds of buildings that are associated with Islam and ancient birthplaces. So, once again, this is not uncommon. And I'm not sure if I can draw a line between what ISIS does and what Saudi Arabia and Bahrain do. But then we also see this pop up in all kinds of different places in history as well. In Belgium, churches and abbeys were destroyed during the French occupation and the French Revolutionary fervor. In 1914, Germans burned down the library at Louvain in Belgium, and 230,000 ancient rare volumes were destroyed, which of course completely breaks my heart. And as we know, during World War I and World War II, huge old European cities were destroyed, including places like Dresden. And it's just unimaginable, the world heritage and the architecture and the art and everything else that was lost in the destruction of World War I and II all across Europe. Spain during the Spanish Civil War in the 30s, churches and monasteries and libraries were destroyed. Again, this rebellion against the state, this rebellion against religion and all the icons associated with it seems to drive the destruction of this world heritage. And whether it's secular or religious, all world heritage is extremely valuable. There happens to be a lot of religious artifacts and architecture stretching back through time because it was so important as a society. So it's a huge part of the world heritage and legacy that's passed on. And then we have China, of course, during the Cultural Revolution in the 50s and 60s, destroyed a lot of Chinese culture. Of course, a lot of it was just hidden away because they understood the value. It's the same way in Germany during Nazi Germany in World War II. A lot of Germans swirled away a lot of decadent art that otherwise would have been destroyed because they did understand the value of it. But let's go through a little bit more history too. In China, during the occupation of the Western forces during the 19th and 20th century, most of the old summer palace was destroyed by Western forces there. And then again, we see Buddhist monuments all over China have been defaced by Muslims, and this has been a trend that's existed there for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years and continues to go on now. In the Philippines, during the World War II, the entire city of Old Manila was wiped out, another World Heritage site that is lost now. Kosovo, 156 Serbian churches and monasteries were destroyed since 1999. Once again, this religious zealotry and these secular animosities and 12th, 13th, and 14th century churches we're talking about in Kosovo that were destroyed. So once again, just so hard to see things that are survived so many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years and then cannot survive a year being exposed to certain zealot elements. Slovenia, hundreds of manors and castles were destroyed by the resistance in World War II because of the fact that they represented, once again, the power of the state and that needed to be challenged. So hundreds of castles and manors were lost. So and then Israel, of course, is not immune to this as well. Israel, during their takeover of ancient Palestine in the early part of the 20th century, including going up to now, they destroyed over 700 ancient Palestinian villages and have destroyed hundreds of mosques. And to this day, they continue in some of these assaults to go after ancient mosques, one going back all the way to the 6th century. And all these 700 Palestinian villages have been razed to the ground and covered. And in fact, all the names have even been changed so that it would be hard for people to find them on an ancient map. And so there's also, of course, aside from this ancient architecture that we see and these ancient artifacts that are destroyed all over the world through history to make these political and religious points, we also have a long list of libraries that have been lost. And no surprise there because of what libraries represent along with religion and the state. and art as well. Art has been destroyed on a massive scale in all sorts of different conflicts and different scenarios. And I attached a couple lists below of actually a lot of art that's been lost and a lot of libraries that have been lost. Just a interesting list to look at and lament the loss of so much valuable human culture. And but this brings up a lot of issues for me, and one of the main ones is the arrogance of humans, the arrogance of these people in ISIS, the arrogance of any of these people, these puny little fucking humans who think that they have the right to go after this world heritage. Like I mentioned before, all this material, for better or worse, and for whatever it represents as far as religion and the state. The fact is, these are human artifacts that stretch back hundreds of thousands of years and have a great value because history is very important to human culture, or at least it should be. And it's just unfathomable to me that there can be this kind of arrogance and this lack of humility in the face of all this world culture and all these irreplaceable artifacts and sites that are destroyed by these fucking idiots. And also I look at these people too, and I think, well, why don't they see these sites, particularly in places like Syria and Iraq, as a symbol of a fallen empire on Islamic soil? Why don't you look at it that way instead of the stupid, childish way that they do? There's certainly got to be another way to look at it. And then, like I brought up earlier, just the fact that these religions are so sacred, and yet no one has very much respect for the religious beliefs of others, ultimate form of hypocrisy. So anyway, there's my little monologue about Palmyra and the destruction of world heritage that belongs to all humanity, and so disappointing that in a few short weeks, hours, months, and years, things that have survived hundreds and thousands of years are destroyed by fucking idiots. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.